In this video, we're going to go over slope and graphing for our review for the RISE test. Let's go ahead and get started. Now, I've included most types of problems, so you'll see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on your assignment. Most of them should line up to these examples. The first one will be the first example and so on. But any duplicates I cut out of the video so it wasn't forever long. So here we go. Number 1 says find the slope of the line graphed below. So again, remember what slope is. Slope is equal to a fraction that shows us how far the graph is rising divided by how much the graph is running. So rising meaning up or down and running versus side to side. So if I look at this picture and I see my 2 dots, I'm going to try and represent my slope as a fraction of how much is the graph changing going up versus side to side. So I go to one of my points, and I usually go to my left point and then move towards my right point, and I find my rise, so left point versus right point, and I count my rise first and label that on the top. So rising means, in this case, going down 1, 2, 3 spaces. Now remember, rising going down is the negative direction. And in my denominator, I want how much I run. So how much does it take me to get from where I left off to that next point? So 1 to the right. So I can either leave my slope as this fraction, or sometimes you'll see that people simplify it to just -3, because those are equivalent answers. Let's go ahead and talk about how do you find slope that passes through 2 points. Well, again, I want to calculate the rise over the run, but I don't have a picture. So what I need to figure out is, and this is the equation I'm going to use, I need to figure out how far apart my y values are. So I subtract the y's to find my rise, and I'm going to subtract my x's for my run. This little 2 and the little 1 just are talking about which point it is that I'm looking at. So this is x and y of 0.1, so they get the little 1s, and this is x and y of 0.2. So I'm going to go ahead and insert into my equation. So I have 9, so fraction 9 minus 3 on top, and in the denominator I'm going to have 5 minus, and I do need to take into account that there is going to also be another minus for this -3, and simplify. 9 minus 3 is 6, and 5 minus a -3 is 8. Now that's because subtracting a negative is the same as adding. This is the correct slope. I'm rising 6 and running 8, but we can always simplify fractions. So that is the same as rising 3 and running 4, because I could simplify the numerator and the denominator by dividing each by 2, reduce them. The next question asks me to graph a line with a slope of 3 that passes through the point to -2. Remember, this is the x and this is the y. Remember, slope should always be a fraction, and if it's not, I'm going to unsimplify it so it has a rise and a run. My rise is just the number on top, and I always make my denominator 1. So to graph this, I need a starting point. Otherwise, my rise and my run's not going to do me any good. So my starting point is at 2, -2. So on the x-axis to 2, and on down the y-axis to -2. Now that I know where I'm starting, I can do this rise of 3 and run of 1. So I'm going to rise 3, 1, 2, 3, and run to the right 1. And all I have to do is click my line tool, connect the 2 dots, and it will continue it. Now if I didn't have that option, I would just continue to count up and over that same pattern. Rise 3 over 1, and I could also go in reverse. Down 3, but to keep that line straight, I have to go backwards 1. So there's my graph. Similarly, if I graph an line that has a slope of 1/3 and a y-intercept of 3, remember you always need a starting point. The slope, which is my rise, telling me to go up 1 and over 3, well, from where? I need a starting point. So my starting point is at 3 on the y-axis, hence the name the y-intercept, so +3, and I'm rising 1 and running to the right 3. I connect my points, and I have my line. Okay, now this equation tells me the same information as the last problem. It tells me my y-intercept and my slope, but it gives it to me in an equation form. So in my equation form, the number on its own is my y-intercept, and the number next to x tells me my rise over my run. Now, if you're saying to yourself that 4 is not a rise and a run, it's not a fraction, remember I can make it a fraction. -4 always over 1. I'm going to go ahead and plot my y-intercept. I always need a starting point first. And this -4 is telling me this time, instead of going up, I'm going down. So counting down 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces, and to the right 1. And I could continue that pattern again and again, and I can just combine them using my line tool. Okay, so let's talk about a few special cases. Now, on this example, sometimes I have people say, but Miss Johnson, there is no starting point. There is no plus anything. When that is the case, there really is a plus something. There is just an imaginary +0 that we didn't bother to write, because adding 0 doesn't change my equation at all. That means I am going to start at the center of my graph. That is my starting point, and then I'm going to rise 4. So rising 4 and running 3. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and running to the right 1, 2, 3. Similarly, for this one, I have an imaginary +0. So I'm going to start over here at 0. And if there's no number in front of x, make sure you put a 1 and turn it into a fraction, so 1 over 1. So I'm going to count a +1 and a +1. So my slope, +1 over 1. Let's look at another example. So if I'm trying to graph this equation, I know I'm going to start at -4 this time. And similarly to the last problem, if there's not a number there, I put 1 and it's over 1. So up 1 over 1. And there's my line. Let's look at this last problem. So again, what do I do when there is no plus or minus anything? Remember, there's an imaginary +0. So I start at 0 and make my slope a fraction. There's a number there, but I'm going to put it over 1. And -4 means I'm going to count down and to the right. So down 1, 2, 3, 4, and to the right 1. Connect your dots, and we have our line. Hey, last one, try this one on your own. Hey, try and imagine what it is that I do. Pause while you decide, and then press play to check to see if you're right. All right, so I'm going to start at -3. Now, sometimes when people see that negative out front, they're like, oh, that must mean the negatives goes with the top and the bottom, and that is not the case. When there is a negative out front, the negative, we are going to let it stick with the 3. So that's telling me that I'm going to go down 3, and that 2 is positive, so that's negative, that's positive, and I'm going to go right 2. So up 1, 2, 3, and right 2. Okay, so now that we've talked about graphing normal equations in that y equals mx plus b format, let's talk about what to do when I look at the equation and x and y are on the same side. Well, I am not going to use the same method. Because this y has something next to it, unlike it did on the last several problems, I cannot use this as my slope, and this -2 is my slope, and this 3 is my y-intercept. I need to find them. I'm going to write this again to give myself more room. Hey, what do? I draw my line down my equal sign. I am going to get y by itself. I'm going to turn it into this format right here. How do I get that y by itself? Go farthest away first. To get rid of 2x, to get rid of another term, I'm going to do the opposite. The opposite of subtracting 2x is adding 2x. So I'm going to add 2x on both sides. That's gone. I don't combine -3 and 2 because -3 doesn't have an x. I'm going to undo timesing by -3 by dividing by -3. And I'm going to divide both of them. So -3 over -3 is 1. Now, and 2 divided by -3. Now, you might be saying to yourself, but that's not a whole number. That's okay. All we're going to do is copy and paste down +2 over -3x. So what is my slope and what is my y-intercept? Now, notice this isn't a backwards format. I'm going to rewrite this. so that the x comes first. My slope is is 2 over negative 3, or you could write it as negative 2 over 3. Both would work. And my y-intercept is 1. Then I want to graph it, so my y-intercept is 1, and my slope is 2 over negative 3, so up 2. And this time my denominator is negative, so to the left 1, 2, 3. And there's my line. And that's it. That's everything we covered with graphing. If you have any questions, feel free to please reach out, and have a great day.